Have you ever had the unsettling feeling of reliving the exact same moment for the second time, even knowing with absolute certainty that it never happened before? As if time had taken a small leap backward, as if your mind had accessed a memory that shouldn't exist. The setting is familiar, the words seem predictable, the environment sounds strangely known, and yet, everything is new. That's déjà vu. And if you've ever experienced it, you know how intense, real, and, in many cases, disturbing this experience is. For a few seconds, logic seems to fail. The brain tries to explain but can't. You feel like you've lived this before, but you don't know when, where, or how. It's as if memory is playing a trick too perfect to ignore. Have you ever experienced this? That quick, almost invisible sensation that arises from nowhere and disappears as quickly as it came, leaving only one question echoing in your mind. How is this possible? For a long time, déjà vu was treated as something mystical, spiritual, or even supernatural. Some people believed it was a memory of past lives, others saw it as a sign of premonition, as if the future were leaking into the present. But science was never satisfied with vague explanations. And the more researchers advanced in the study of the human brain, the more this strange phenomenon began to take on surprisingly concrete contours. Today we know that déjà vu is directly linked to how the brain processes memory, recognition, and perception of reality. It's not imagination or fantasy. It's a real phenomenon recorded, studied, and reported by millions of people around the world. It is estimated that most adults have experienced at least one episode of déjà vu in their lifetime. And the most intriguing thing is that it happens to healthy people, at absolutely ordinary times, without any warning. What makes this experience even more fascinating is the fact that it seems so convincing. The brain doesn't just suggest familiarity, it asserts it. It creates a momentary certainty that this instant has been lived before. And that's exactly where one of the greatest mysteries of neuroscience comes in. Why does the brain, whose function is to guide us in reality, sometimes create such a powerful illusion? What you are about to discover may surprise you, because this seemingly simple sensation hides complex and delicate brain processes involving deep areas of the brain responsible for memory and recognition. Areas that, when functioning in perfect synchronization, help us distinguish the new from the familiar. But when something is slightly out of rhythm, even for fractions of a second, the experience can transform into something completely out of the ordinary. Stay with me until the end, because understanding déjà vu isn't just about understanding a curious phenomenon. It's about opening a window into the inner workings of the human mind. It's about realizing how our perception of reality is constructed in real time, second by second, and how small flaws in this process can generate sensations so intense that they challenge our own notion of truth. Perhaps déjà vu isn't a random error. Perhaps it's a sign that the brain is working too fast, or, paradoxically, out of sync. A kind of momentary short circuit between what we see, what we feel, and what we remember. But does this happen in any part of the brain? Or is there a specific region behind this experience as strange as it is fascinating? Our investigation begins precisely with this question. Because behind déjà vu, there is a silent, powerful, and extremely sensitive region of the brain, and understanding its role can completely change how you perceive this sensation that, until now, seemed impossible to explain. And as you listen to all this, perhaps a memory will surface. Maybe a specific moment when this feeling caught you by surprise, in a simple conversation, on any street, in a completely ordinary place. If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below about what touched you most or what your own experience with déjà vu was like. Reading these stories creates something powerful because it shows that this phenomenon is not isolated, it's not rare, and that many people feel exactly the same kind of silent strangeness. And if at any point during this video you felt that slight shiver of recognition, that, wait, this has happened to me before, liking the video is a simple way to say that this content resonates with you. This gesture helps the channel continue exploring topics like this, which blend science, mystery, and the deep workings of the human mind, subjects that don't always come up, but make all the difference when they reach the right person. Now, if you enjoy understanding the brain beyond the obvious, questioning reality as it presents itself, and delving into the strange phenomena of the human body, subscribing to the channel is almost a natural step. This way, you can continue following these investigations, these uncomfortable and fascinating questions that make us look inside our own minds with more curiosity and fewer preconceived notions. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people who have also wondered if what they felt was just their imagination, or something much deeper. Every comment, every like, every subscription creates a community of curious, restless people open to understanding how the brain really works. And from here the question becomes even more intriguing. Because to understand why déjà vu is so compelling, so real, and so difficult to ignore, we need to look more closely at a specific region of the brain, a silent, essential, and surprisingly powerful area that may be behind it all. When we talk about déjà vu, it's important to clear the ground before moving forward. Because this phenomenon carries a huge amount of misinterpretations that, for a long time, have obscured the understanding of what really happens in the brain. Déjà vu is not a memory of a past life, it's not a prediction of the future, and it's not a mystical sign hidden in time. Despite seeming extraordinary, it arises from absolutely real, measurable, and profoundly human processes. What makes it all the more intriguing is precisely this: something so strange arising from such concrete mechanisms. The word déjà vu comes from French and literally means already seen. But this simple translation doesn't capture the complexity of the experience. What happens is not just the sensation of visually recognizing something. It's a complete perception of familiarity, as if that entire moment, the environment, the dialogue, the emotional atmosphere, were being relived. The brain doesn't just say, "This looks familiar," it affirms, "This has already happened." And this momentary certainty is what causes such an impact. Many people confuse déjà vu with coincidence or a strong memory, but it is neither of those things. It's also not imagination or fantasy. Studies show that during a déjà vu episode, the brain is active, alert, and functioning. There is no loss of consciousness or mental confusion. On the contrary, the person clearly perceives that something is out of place. There is a strange lucidity there, almost uncomfortable, as if the mind were observing itself making a small mistake. And perhaps this is one of the most important points: déjà vu is not a gross error. It is subtle, quick, and too precise to be ignored. It lasts only a few seconds but leaves a strong emotional impact. It's like a whisper from the brain saying that there is a hidden truth behind the way we perceive the present. A minimal flaw in the system, almost invisible, but enough to cause a rupture in the sensation of reality. For decades, science distrusted these experiences precisely because they seemed difficult to measure. But that has changed. Today, déjà vu is treated as a legitimate phenomenon within cognitive neuroscience. Researchers analyze this state as a rare window into the inner workings of the human mind, especially how memory and perception work together to construct the now. What we call the present is not something simple. It is a continuous, fragile construction that is extremely dependent on synchronization. The brain is constantly making silent decisions. It assesses what is new, what is familiar, what deserves attention, and what can be ignored. This process happens in fractions of a second and sustains our sense of continuity, identity, and security. Déjà vu arises when this mechanism suffers a slight misalignment. Not large enough to cause confusion, but precise enough to generate the sensation of repetition. This explains why déjà vu doesn't happen all the time. It's not a permanent state nor a constant defect. It appears at specific moments, often linked to mental fatigue, similar environments, or stimuli that activate patterns already known by the brain. Even so, the experience never seems banal. Each episode carries an emotional intensity that makes the person stop, reflect, and question. There's also a curious detail: déjà vu doesn't bring new information. It doesn't anticipate events, doesn't reveal future dialogues, doesn't change decisions. It only creates a feeling of recognition without a clear origin. And this is essential to understanding why it cannot be confused with premonition. The brain isn't predicting anything. It is, in some way, classifying the present as the past. This misclassification reveals something profound about our mentality as a species. We fully trust our perception but rarely realize how constructed it is. Déjà vu shatters this trust for a few seconds and reminds us that what we call reality is, to a large extent, an interpretation organized by the brain. An efficient interpretation most of the time, but not infallible. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because understanding what déjà vu is not opens up an even more powerful question. If it's neither an old memory nor a sign of the future, nor a coincidence, then where exactly does this process take place? Which region of the brain participates in this momentary transformation of perception? Is there a specific point where this sensation is born, gains strength, and disappears? When we look more closely at these questions, we begin to realize that déjà vu may be less of a supernatural mystery and more of a direct reflection of the complexity of the human brain and how it constructs meaning every second. And before moving forward on this journey of revelations, leave a simple sentence in the comments that translates what you felt when you heard all this. Right, this makes sense to me. When we begin to look at the brain more closely, we realize that nothing there functions in isolation. Every sensation, every decision, every memory is the result of a silent dance between different regions, all working together to create the continuous experience we call reality. And it is precisely in this delicate mechanism that the temporal lobe comes into play, an area often ignored by the general public, but absolutely central when we talk about memory, recognition, and the perception of time. The temporal lobe is located on the sides of the brain, near the temples, and acts as a true organizer of meaning. It helps the brain answer fundamental questions without us even realizing it. Is this new or familiar? Have I experienced something similar before? Is this person known or a stranger? Does this moment belong to the present or is it a memory? These decisions happen automatically, in milliseconds, sustaining our sense of continuity and security in the world. Within the temporal lobe are structures deeply linked to memory, such as areas responsible for storing experiences and others in charge of comparing them with what we are experiencing now. It is there that the brain constantly cross-references past and present. Each new stimulus passes through an invisible filter that assesses whether it has already been recorded before. When everything works in perfect harmony, this sorting is silent. The mind simply knows what is new and what is familiar. What's most striking is that this process isn't conscious. You don't decide to recognize a place or a situation. Recognition simply happens. And that's precisely why any small glitch in this region can generate such strange experiences. It doesn't require significant damage or a dramatic alteration. A slight delay in communication between these areas is enough to confuse the system and create sensations that are completely out of the ordinary. The temporal lobe also plays a role in how we perceive time. Not clock time, but psychological time, the kind that allows us to feel that something has just happened, is happening now, or belongs to a distant past. This perception is essential for the brain to construct a coherent timeline of our personal history. When this timeline is interfered with, even minimally, the subjective experience changes drastically. This is where déjà vu begins to take on clearer contours. Imagine that the brain receives new information, but for some reason this information is processed as if it were already stored. The present is labeled as the past. The result is not a true memory, but a feeling of familiarity without origin. The brain does not find the corresponding file, but insists on the feeling of recognition. This insistence is what makes déjà vu so convincing. This type of glitch doesn't mean the brain is broken. On the contrary, it reveals how complex and sophisticated this system is. A system that works based on constant predictions, rapid comparisons, and silent decisions. The temporal lobe acts as a curator of our experience, separating what is part of our history from what is being lived now. When this curator gets confused for a moment, reality seems to slip away. There are situations that favor this type of confusion. Environments very similar to others already experienced, repeated visual patterns, states of mental fatigue, or excessive stimuli can overload this comparison system. The brain tries to accelerate recognition to save energy, and this shortcut creates the gap. It's not something planned. It's a side effect of the efficiency of the human brain. This understanding completely changes the mindset with which we view déjà vu. It ceases to be a distant mystery and becomes a direct reflection of how the brain makes decisions about what is real, new, or familiar. A small transformation in the way we see this phenomenon already reveals something bigger. Our perception is not a faithful photograph of the world, but an active construction, constantly adjusted behind the scenes of the mind. The impact of this goes beyond scientific curiosity. It touches on something deeper, almost philosophical. If the brain can, for a few seconds, convince us of something that didn't happen, what else does it do without us realizing it? How many of our daily certainties are, in fact, interpretations shaped by invisible processes? Déjà vu acts as a glimpse, a brief revelation that much more is happening behind the conscious experience. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because understanding the role of the temporal lobe opens the way to an even more intriguing discovery. In certain contexts, this same region that sustains our memory and perception can enter specific states of activity that completely transform the déjà vu experience. These states have been observed, recorded, and studied by science, helping to explain why some people experience this phenomenon more intensely and frequently than others. And as this journey continues to unfold, leave a simple phrase in the comments that represents how you're feeling right now. Right, I'm on this journey too. It was precisely when science began to observe the brain in extreme situations that something caught their attention. For a long time, déjà vu was seen as a phenomenon too curious and predictable to be studied in depth. But this changed when neurologists began to hear very specific reports from patients with temporal lobe epilepsy. People who, before a seizure, described intense sensations of familiarity, as if they were reliving an entire moment, complete, full of emotional details. It wasn't a simple, "this seems familiar." It was something much deeper, almost overwhelming. These accounts began to repeat themselves with an undeniable consistency. Patients of different ages, cultures, and backgrounds described extremely similar experiences. A sudden feeling of recognition, accompanied by strangeness, sometimes even fear. The most intriguing aspect was the timing. These episodes occurred seconds before clear electrical changes in the brain, recorded by neurological exams. For the first time, déjà vu ceased to be merely a subjective sensation and began to have a measurable trace. That's when suspicion turned into investigation. Neurologists realized that these experiences were directly linked to anomalous electrical discharges in the temporal lobe. Not full-blown seizures, but small, atypical activations, almost like an electrical echo passing through the areas responsible for memory and recognition. The impact of this was profound. For the first time, there was a clear link between déjà vu and specific brain activity. What impressed the researchers most was not just the presence of déjà vu in these patients, but its intensity. While most people experience quick and subtle episodes, these patients described long, detailed, emotionally charged sensations. Some reported absolute certainty that they knew exactly what was going to happen next, even when it didn't materialize. Others felt a mixture of nostalgia and alertness, as if something very important was about to be revealed. These experiences were not mystical. They were neurologically consistent. Based on these studies, science began to understand that déjà vu could be a side effect of a highly sensitive system. The temporal lobe, in dealing with memory and recognition, operates in a delicate balance. Any minimal electrical alteration can generate a temporary distortion in how the present is interpreted. It's as if the brain, for an instant, makes a wrong decision about what is happening now. This discovery brought about a silent transformation in the scientific mindset. Déjà vu ceased to be treated as a peripheral phenomenon and began to be seen as a valuable clue. An involuntary revelation of how the brain constructs the sensation of reality. By observing patients with temporal lobe epilepsy, researchers realized that they were, in fact, looking behind the scenes of human mental functioning. And this generated an even greater impact. If a specific electrical activation can provoke such a convincing feeling of familiarity, then recognition is not absolute. It is an interpretation. A decision made by the brain based on electrical signals, stored patterns, and internal expectations. Déjà vu exposes this hidden truth in an almost brutal way. It shows that what we feel as certain may, in some cases, be merely a momentary construct. Another point that drew attention was the fact that not all patients with temporal lobe epilepsy reported déjà vu. This indicated that it was not a direct and automatic consequence, but a specific combination of factors. The exact location of the electrical activity, its intensity, the timing, and even the person's emotional state influenced the experience. This reinforced the idea that déjà vu is not a simple defect, but an emergent phenomenon of a complex system. With advances in neuroimaging techniques, researchers began observing the brain in real time, tracking these anomalous activations. And the more data that emerged, the clearer it became that déjà vu was linked to a failure in internal communication. The brain received the information but processed it in the wrong way. The present arrived at the memory sector as if it were the past. The result was a powerful sensation but without a real basis. This understanding brought a new perspective to our daily decisions. If the brain can be confused about the timing of an experience, what does that say about other interpretations we constantly make? How many choices are influenced by internal sensations that seem true, but are merely products of invisible processes? Déjà vu then becomes a symbol. A reminder that our journey through reality is mediated by brain filters that we don't always perceive. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because these clinical observations not only explain why déjà vu occurs in specific neurological contexts, but they also open up possibilities for understanding how more subtle versions of this same mechanism can be present in perfectly healthy people. Small delays, microelectrical activities, fine adjustments that happen every day without drawing attention, but which, at certain moments, produce that strange sensation that everyone knows. Before we delve any further into this investigation, leave a short comment below that represents how you're feeling right now. Right, this makes sense to me. When we put all these pieces together, we begin to arrive at the point most accepted by science today to explain déjà vu, the idea of a small short circuit in memory. Nothing dramatic, nothing visible in common exams, but a subtle misalignment between systems that normally work in perfect synchrony. On one side, perception, responsible for capturing what is happening now. On the other, memory, responsible for saying whether that has already been experienced before. Déjà vu arises precisely when these two systems stop communicating at the right time. Under normal conditions, the brain follows a very clear order. First it perceives, then it registers, and only then does it compare it with past experiences. This sequence is what sustains our notion of the present. But, at certain moments, this order can be reversed for fractions of a second. The information is still being perceived, but it is already treated as a memory. The present arrives at the brain with the wrong label. It's like saving a new file inside an old folder. When you try to understand where it came from, you can't find the origin, but the feeling of familiarity remains. This metaphor of the file saved in the wrong folder helps to visualize what happens. The content is new, but the address is wrong. The brain searches for the original record and doesn't find it because it doesn't exist. Even so, the already experienced label has been applied. The result is this strange, almost paradoxical feeling of recognizing something for the first time. It's not true memory, but it's not imagination either. It's a mistaken classification made by a system that, most of the time, works impressively efficiently. The most curious thing is that this error isn't accompanied by mental confusion. On the contrary, during déjà vu, consciousness is clear. The person knows that it doesn't make sense but feels it anyway. This reveals something profound about how the brain constructs reality. The feeling of certainty doesn't come from logic, it comes from automatic processing. And when this processing fails, the rational mind arrives late, merely observing the impact. This short circuit also explains why déjà vu is usually so quick. As soon as the brain perceives the inconsistency, it corrects the error. The information is rearranged, the present becomes present again, and the sensation dissolves. But the emotional impact has already happened. The mind is left with that strange residue, that silent doubt that doesn't find an immediate answer. It's a self-correcting glitch, but it leaves its mark. From the perspective of human mentality, this is revealing. We like to believe that our decisions, perceptions, and certainties are solid. Déjà vu shows that many of them depend on fine-tuning happening behind the scenes. A small delay, a wrong turn, and the subjective experience changes completely. Not because reality has changed, but because the interpretation has changed. This mechanism also helps to understand why déjà vu is more common at certain stages of life. Moments of transformation, excessive stimuli, mental fatigue, or new environments that resemble past experiences demand a lot from the recognition system. The brain accelerates processes to meet the demand. And the faster it tries to operate, the greater the chance of small synchronization failures. The short circuit is not a sign of weakness, but of overload. There's something almost poetic about it. Déjà vu isn't a gross defect. It's a side effect of the brain's sophistication. A system capable of predicting, comparing, and deciding in milliseconds inevitably creates shortcuts. And sometimes, these shortcuts lead to strange places. The feeling of familiarity arises without a real past, revealing a hidden truth. Our experience of time is not absolute. It is constructed, adjusted, and revised all the time. This understanding changes the journey of those who experience déjà vu. It ceases to be a frightening or inexplicable event and becomes a sign of how the brain tries to maintain coherence with reality. Even if it errs for a moment, it corrects itself. The impact is not in the error itself, but in the fact that we have conscious access to it. We rarely perceive the brain failing in real time. Déjà vu is one of those rare revelations. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because this small synchronization error doesn't happen in a vacuum. It depends on specific regions of the brain, sensitive circuits, and particular states of neural activity. When we understand where this short circuit occurs most frequently, we begin to see déjà vu not as an isolated event, but as part of a larger pattern of how the human mind functions. Before we continue exploring these revelations, leave a simple sentence in the comments that represents how you felt so far. Right, this makes sense to me. There's a very specific reason why déjà vu is not just curious, but profoundly real and, at times, disturbing. It doesn't just happen in the realm of memory or the cold perception of facts. It permeates emotions. And when emotion enters the scene, the experience ceases to be neutral. The brain doesn't just recognize something, it feels something. That's precisely where the impact increases. The temporal lobe doesn't work alone. It's intimately connected to structures responsible for emotions, such as those that regulate fear, comfort, nostalgia, and alertness. When a déjà vu episode occurs, this emotional network can be activated along with memory circuits. The result is a feeling of certainty accompanied by emotion. It's not just, this has already happened. It's, this has already happened and it matters. Even if the rational mind knows it doesn't make sense, the body reacts as if it were true. That's why déjà vu is often accompanied by a strange inner silence. Some people report a pause as if the world were slowing down for a few seconds. Others feel a slight tightness in their chest, a shiver, or even sudden anxiety. These reactions are not an exaggeration. They reflect the activation of deep emotional systems, which reinforce the experience and make it unforgettable. Emotion lends weight to memory even when that memory is false. The brain uses emotions as a marker of importance. The more intense the emotion, the more real something seems. In déjà vu, this logic is reversed. Something seems important for no apparent reason. This creates internal dissonance. The mind tries to find an explanation but cannot. And it is in this empty space that discomfort arises. This mechanism explains why déjà vu can be frightening for some people. Not because something bad is happening, but because the feeling of certainty directly conflicts with logic. The brain says one thing, reason says another. And when two such fundamental parts of the mind disagree, the experience is felt as a subtle threat to the stability of reality. There is also the factor of identity. Our sense of who we are is deeply linked to our memories. When the brain creates a false sense of familiarity, it touches this sensitive core. It's as if, for a moment, the timeline of our personal history becomes blurred. This generates an emotional impact because it touches something very intimate, the continuity of the self. Even if it lasts only a few seconds, the effect is profound. Another important point is that déjà vu happens unexpectedly. It doesn't warn you, it doesn't prepare you. It arises in the midst of common situations, which further increases the feeling of strangeness. If it only happened in extreme moments, perhaps it would be easier to ignore. But when it arises in a simple conversation, in any room, on an ordinary street, it breaks normality. And the human brain reacts badly to unexpected disruptions of pattern. Emotional involvement also explains why some people try to attribute greater meanings to déjà vu. The sensation is so strong that it seems to demand a grand explanation. Something so intense couldn't just be a technical error, right? But the hidden truth is that the brain doesn't need major glitches to generate significant subjective effects. Small activations in certain regions produce disproportionate impacts on conscious experience. This perception changes how we approach our own decisions. If a feeling can be so convincing without being true, how many other everyday certainties are also shaped by silent emotions? Déjà vu acts as an uncomfortable reminder that feeling certain is not the same as being right. The human mind constantly takes shortcuts, and most of them go unnoticed. There's also a fascinating aspect to all this. Déjà vu reveals how much the brain values coherence. It prefers a wrong explanation to no explanation at all. By classifying the present as the past, it tries to keep the internal narrative organized. Even when it fails, the goal is to protect the continuity of the experience. The discomfort arises because we perceive this attempt in real time. This revelation is part of a larger journey of understanding the mind. It's not just about explaining a strange phenomenon, but about understanding how emotions, memory, and perception intertwine to construct what we call reality. Déjà vu is a visible glitch in a system that normally operates invisibly. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because if emotional involvement makes déjà vu so compelling, we need to look more closely at when this experience ceases to be merely curious and begins to raise more serious questions. There are times when this sensation is simply part of the brain's normal functioning, and others when it may signal something different. This distinction completely changes how we interpret the impact of déjà vu in real life. Before we move on with this reflection, leave a simple sentence in the comments that represents what you've felt so far. Right, this makes sense to me. After understanding why déjà vu is so intense and emotionally charged, a question that many people keep silent about almost automatically arises: is this normal, or is it a sign that something is wrong? This question is part of the journey for those who experience this more consciously, because when something shakes our perception of reality, it's natural to seek limits, explanations, and reassurance. And here it's important to separate curiosity from fear, information from alarm. In the vast majority of cases, déjà vu is perfectly normal. It happens in healthy people without any neurological condition, and is directly linked to the brain's efficiency in recognizing patterns, conserving energy, and making quick decisions. The human brain is an anticipation machine. It tries to predict what comes next all the time. When these predictions imperfectly intersect with the perception of the present, déjà vu emerges as a side effect of this sophistication. That's why it appears more frequently at specific moments in life. Phases of transformation, changes in routine, new environments that remind one of others already experienced, periods of mental stress, excessive stimuli, or even accumulated fatigue. In these situations, the brain works in accelerated mode, trying to process a lot of information at the same time. small synchronization delays become more likely, and the subjective impact appears. In this context, déjà vu is not a warning of danger. It is merely a momentary reflection of a complex system adjusting its own gears. The sensation passes quickly, does not repeat continuously, and is not accompanied by other worrying symptoms. The brain corrects itself, reorganizes the experience, and moves on. But like all human experiences, there's another side to this story that deserves attention. Déjà vu begins to raise questions when it becomes too frequent, intense, or associated with other signs. It's not the isolated sensation that matters but the whole picture. Episodes that last longer, that are accompanied by mental confusion, memory lapses, altered states of consciousness, strange bodily sensations, or difficulty orienting oneself in time and space deserve closer observation. In these specific cases, déjà vu ceases to be merely a curiosity and becomes a possible sign that something in brain function is out of the ordinary. Not as a diagnosis but as a symptom. Science has already shown that, in some neurological conditions, especially those related to the temporal lobe, experiences of intense familiarity can occur more frequently. And that is precisely why context is everything. The most common mistake is alarmism. Experiencing occasional déjà vu doesn't mean illness, just as having a headache doesn't mean something serious. The brain produces strange experiences because it is complex, adaptive, and highly sensitive. Understanding this completely changes the mindset with which we approach these sensations. Information reduces fear. Clarity transforms anxiety into curiosity. There is also an important psychological impact to this understanding. When a person understands that déjà vu is, most of the time, just a side effect of how the mind organizes time and memory, the experience loses some of its unsettling power. It ceases to be a threatening enigma and becomes an interesting sign of how the brain operates behind the scenes. This shift in perspective is a small internal transformation. Instead of fighting the feeling or trying to explain it mystically, the person begins to observe it. And observing one's own mind is one of the deepest paths to self-knowledge. Déjà vu, in this sense, becomes less of a problem and more of a rare window into understanding how our decisions, certainties, and interpretations are constructed. At the same time, recognizing the limits of what is considered normal is also an act of care. It's not about living in constant alert, but about developing a more conscious relationship with one's own mental functioning. Knowing when something is part of human variability and when it deserves attention is a skill that comes from knowledge, not fear. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because understanding when déjà vu is normal prepares us for something even more interesting. Understanding how small variations of this same mechanism can happen daily without us realizing it. There are similar, less intense experiences that influence our choices, our sense of familiarity with people, places, and even ideas. And when we look at this carefully, we begin to see how the brain shapes reality much more actively than we imagine. Before we continue with this reflection, leave a simple sentence in the comments that represents how you feel right now. Write, "This makes sense to me." When we reach this point in the reflection, déjà vu ceases to be merely a curious phenomenon of the brain and begins to assume a much larger role. It transforms into a kind of mirror. A rare moment in which the human mind reveals itself to itself. Because ultimately what déjà vu exposes is not just a memory error, but the limits of how we perceive reality. Most of the time, we live with the feeling that the world is exactly as we perceive it. We fully trust the sequence of events, the linearity of time, the solidity of the present. The brain constructs the now so efficiently that we rarely question this process. But déjà vu breaks this illusion for a few seconds. It shows that the present is not something given, fixed, or absolute. It is assembled, organized, and interpreted in real time. This revelation has a silent but profound impact. Because if the brain can, in an instant, convince us that something new has already happened, it means that our experience of the world is mediated by internal decisions that we do not consciously control. Reality, as we perceive it, is a narrative constructed behind the scenes of the mind. An extremely functional narrative, but not a perfect one. Déjà vu is unsettling precisely because it exposes this hidden truth. It breaks the automatic trust we have in perception. Not dramatically but enough to create a fissure. For a few seconds the brain fails in its main function, separating past, present, and future. And when this separation becomes blurred, we realize how much we depend on it to maintain a sense of identity and continuity. There is something transformative about this perception. Instead of seeing déjà vu as a flaw, we can see it as a window. A rare opportunity to observe the brain during a moment of adjustment, almost as if it were possible to hear the sound of the internal gears rearranging themselves. Few experiences allow this kind of direct access to the workings of the conscious mind. This perspective changes the mindset with which we approach our own certainties. How many times have we felt absolute conviction about something without realizing that this conviction stems from automatic processes? How many decisions are made based on internal sensations that seem solid, but are merely quick interpretations made by the brain? Déjà vu reminds us that feeling certain is not the same as accessing the truth. This phenomenon also reveals how delicate the human mental balance is. The brain needs to function with extreme precision for reality to make sense. Small delays, microglitches, or poorly synchronized adjustments are enough to create experiences that challenge everything we consider normal. And yet, this system works incredibly well most of the time. Déjà vu doesn't diminish the brain. On the contrary, it highlights how sophisticated it is. There's something almost philosophical about all this. If the brain constructs the present every second, then now isn't a fixed point in time, but a continuous flow of interpretations. Déjà vu arises when this flow stumbles. Not because the mind is lost, but because it's working too fast, trying to maintain coherence in a world full of stimuli, patterns, and repetitions. This understanding also has an emotional impact. When we realize that the mind can create such real sensations without an objective basis, we begin to look at our internal experiences with more curiosity and less judgment. Déjà vu ceases to be something frightening and becomes a reminder of cognitive humility. We don't know everything. We don't control everything. And that's part of the human condition. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because this momentary glitch in the perception of time is not an isolated event in human experience. There are other, less intense phenomena that reveal this same dynamic of reality construction. Small distortions, invisible adjustments, and silent interpretations that shape how we see the world, people, and ourselves. When we begin to connect these dots, déjà vu becomes merely the gateway to a much greater understanding of how the mind operates. And as this journey continues to unfold, leave a simple phrase in the comments that sums up what went through your mind while hearing all of this. Right, I'm on this journey too. If you've made it this far, it's because this topic has truly stayed with you until the end. And that, in itself, says a lot. If this reflection on déjà vu, the brain, and how the mind constructs reality has given you any insight, leave a comment writing, "This message was for me. I read everything, and it's in that exchange that this space gains even more meaning." If at any point you felt that this conversation connected with something you've experienced, liking the video is a simple way to show it. Not as an automatic gesture, but as a sign that this type of content makes you think, question, and look at the human mind with more curiosity. And if you enjoy exploring these mysteries of the brain, understanding the inner workings of the decisions, perceptions, and sensations that shape who we are, subscribing to the channel is a way to continue this journey with me. Here, each video is designed precisely for that, to provoke reflection, expand awareness, and transform the way we see what happens within our own minds. There's a video over here that complements this topic and delves even deeper into this line of thought. Click there and continue reading.